How's it going, YouTube? Comments again today with another video. And today, guys, what I'm bringing you is everything you need to know about preparing for an event. Now, this is a really cool topic for me and something that I've wanted to make for a really long time, and that's because there's so many different ways that you can go about it, but I actually have a few ways that I really enjoy to go about it, especially because a lot of this is your own mentality. It's a lot of how you play test, what you think about when you're play testing, and it's essentially like how you build your sideboard, and if you main deck anything against your worst matchups. So we're going to be going over all that and more. The first thing that I want to start off with today is that we are 240 subs away from being at 8,000 subscribers. What that means is the image in front of you is going to be a giveaway. I'm giving away an entire striker core. The anchors and Shizukus went up a lot, so I want to make sure that I bought those and I was able to send this out to someone who really hasn't been able to try striker out yet. And I think that's going to be really cool to gift this to someone who can actually start their journey with the deck, as I did fairly long time ago, and it's so much fun to play. It's a very high ceiling, so I really hope whoever wins this really is able to use it and goes out to locals or events, or just really is able to enjoy the deck like I do. I appreciate each and every one of you, and this is just a small token of my appreciation. When we hit 10K, I'll be doing another giveaway. We'll be doing another big tournament, many things to come. So if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing, and I appreciate you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into our first topic here about preparing for an event. The first thing I want to bring out is that there's actually going to be a link that I'll throw in the description below, and that's going to be an immediate link to filling out a deck list online. You should always fill out prior to the event and print out your deck list so you have this on hand and you're not scrambling last second in line and really trying to get your list in. I don't like this idea. I see this happen a lot where people just kind of like crowd the front of the line trying to get registered in last second. This is just really nice to have, because even if you're running a little late and you're stopping for like breakfast or what have you, you still have this deck list ready to go. The second you walk in, you can just hop in line and you can go ahead and hand it over. This is something that I do every single event, and this is like mandatory for me. I feel horrible if I don't have this with me, because this is just something where you just feel the scramble right when you get in the door, and that's something, or like in the car you're filling it out, right? And that's not something that I really ever want to be a part of. Plus, if you're printing it out, you don't really have the ability to have like bad handwriting, right? If you print it out, then everything looks really clean and it's really clear. I actually got a game loss one time because I was playing back in Monarch format and my handwriting wasn't the best and I wasn't able to get a deck list printed out, and the tail on my 3 wasn't long enough, and so they said that I only had 2 Monarch Stormforth in my deck list and gave me an improper deck list and game loss, which was horrible. I couldn't believe that. I was like, no one would ever play 2 Monarch Stormforth in a Monarch deck. Like, it was dumb, but it happens, and that's why we need to be printing off our deck list to make sure things like that don't happen. So use my misfortune as a way to never have that happen to you. And always make sure that you're reviewing your deck list as well to make sure that everything looks correct. So when you are turning in, you are confident that you have a proper deck list. The other thing on the flip side of that, if you are ordering cards, make sure that you know those cards will be there, because otherwise, again, that's another scramble that you're going to be doing, and I don't want to see you ever in that situation. So if you are going to be ordering cards, make sure that you know that they'll be there before you go to the event. Otherwise, you'll be changing your deck list on the fly, and you might have to play something that you weren't ready to play, and that can throw off your entire day. And the next thing that I want to talk about here is eating a big breakfast. This other thing will get tied in with getting plenty of rest. So what I mean by this is you need to make sure that you have enough sleep in you and that you're eating a lot in the morning, because there's not always time in between rounds when you are able to eat, because sometimes you'll go into time and then the next round's right up immediately after. And then if you don't have enough sleep, if you've never been to a big event before, like a YCS, even sometimes at regionals, you're playing like 8 or 9 hours of Yu-Gi-Oh straight. Like, especially if you're doing really well, you need to make sure that you have enough sleep to the point when your brain doesn't turn off midday. Like, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Eating a big breakfast at the beginning of the day too, it doesn't really make you feel tired or anything. Like, you're already waking up, so you want to make sure that you get all this energy in you now, and so by the time that you're at your event, you're ready to go. Because it also ties in with this too. Pack healthy snacks and plenty of water, because you don't want to eat a lot mid-tournament or like later tournament, because your brain's just going to get fried and then you're going to be really tired. You're going to be just not feeling the greatest to continue. If you bring like healthy snacks, like Cliff Bars, you have like like some Nutrient bars, a lot of water. These are things that will give you a little bit of an energy boost. It won't be too much food on you, and it'll really help your mentality moving through the rest of the day, because you'll have food in you, but you won't be like overly tired because you ate too much food, or feeling not the best, right? So this is another thing too, where you'll literally see me walking around with like Powerades water and like different snacks for whatever team I'm with or whatever car I'm with, because if I ever come with like 4 or 5, I'm making sure that everyone's doing well and that we're all like at our top game. And that's one thing too, is if you have a friend group that you're going with, make sure and check in on each other, make sure that you're all doing well, because it can get to a point where you can be really tired or exhausted really fast in an event, especially when you're playing 8 or 9 hours. It can really take a toll on you. So just kind of make sure that you're checking yourself throughout the day, drinking that water, eating your snacks, and just making sure that you're able to keep going. The next thing is with testing. So this is the part that we're all here for. And how do you test? What do you think about before an event? What do you think about when you're on your way to the event? How do you really prepare? A lot of these things you should be absolutely ready for before the event. Up to a couple days prior, you should feel really confident before you go in it. And the ways that you'll be able to do that is starting with, what matchups are you worried about? So if you're playing, let's say, Invoke Shadal Dogmatica, what matchups are you terrified of? What cards are you terrified of? Like, honestly, it'd be like Anti-Spell, IO, Droll. Like, there's a lot of cards that can be really detrimental on you, right? The other thing too is like, what matchups are you worried about? Are you worried about losing die roll to Drytron and watching them go full combo and then you have no hand trap and you can't out their board? Are you worried about decks that have Scythe Lock like PK? These are things that you really have to think about. And then also, how many times do you think that you'll play against it? So whenever I'm crafting my deck list for an event, regionals are different from YCSs. YCSs are different from nationals. These big events, you really have to think about it, because you're going to be playing against different matchups and you're going to have different situations against them. So for me, if I'm ever going to a bigger event, no matter what it is, I assume that I'm going to be playing against at least 1 to 2 Drytron. And that's going to be pretty common. More in the later rounds, usually not too early rounds. In the early rounds, right now, if there was an event tomorrow, I would assume that I'm going to play against at least 3 or 4 Sword Soul. That might be generous as far as too little. You might play against 5 or 6. It's very popular and rather cheap right now. I say cheap very loosely, because there's other decks that have just been like way more expensive, right? But so like Sword Soul is still a deck that you'll play against a lot. So that's something that you think about. Invoke Shadal Dogmatica, I'd probably put next to Drytron and play against it once or twice. Am I really afraid of that deck? So there's a lot of things that I'm thinking about, like, okay, these are my card choices, and this is why, because I don't want to play against this deck. If I play against this deck, this could be an issue. And these are things and questions you really have to ask yourself before you're going to go. And especially if you're not going to be playing against it too much, you still have to make sure that you're prepared, but maybe that's more of a side prepare more than a main deck prepare. Because if you're looking at your main deck objectively, sometimes you have to change things around. The next thing, how generic is your sideboard? So what I mean by this is my sideboard right now is roughly like 3 Twin, 3 of the Water Kaiju. I have 1 Jamming Waves, 2 Bell, 3 Droll, and I think 3 Ash is 15. And for that is just because my side hits just about everything that I need, right? I have outs for back row, I have outs for like the rogue decks and like the more mid-range decks with like Ash on my side, and even Droll in some of those matchups can be really solid. Matchups like Invoke Shadal Dogmatica, for me playing Striker, is really tough. So I'm putting in Ashes for the sided in Doll Fusions. I'm putting in my Drolls. I might be putting in my Bells for the Invocation, for the Nadir, for the Schism. There's a lot of things that I'm considering when I'm looking at my sideboard. And I basically sit down at a table with my deck, and then I look at my side deck, and then I look at my main deck, and I'm like, all right, I just lost game 1 against IDS. What do I put in now? And then I'll sit there and literally just practice siding before an event at a table. And that's something that you should really get in the habit of doing. And then you can be like, all right, I won round 1 against trains or like earth machines, right? And like, just to think about the rogue matchups, and you're like, what am I putting in? What's important? Are they making me go first? Am I going second? And these are the things that you really have to think about, because no matter what the matchup is, as long as you know how you'll side for it, no matter how like ambiguous the matchup is, right? Like maybe you won't play against Earth Machines, but what if there's that one person? Then you'll know exactly how to sideboard against that person if you sit down and you're asking other people questions. You're making sure that you know what the correct cards to hit in the matchup are and what your sideboard targets already are before you start, because at that point you can side faster and you can be ready to go against that matchup. The next thing is, do you change your main deck to account for your worst matchup? What I mean by this is that if Bird Up is your worst matchup, absolutely 100% this matchup is killer for you. Maybe you'll end up main decking Droll this event because you're like, all right, so my worst matchup is Bird Up and Droll hurts that deck like a lot. And then you say, okay, is Droll generically good against other matchups? You'd be like, okay, against IDS, it's amazing. Invoke Shaddoll Dogmatic has a really hard time with Droll. Other like rogue matchups might have a hard time with that too. Certain matchups, even like some parts of Dragon can have a hard time with that. So maybe Droll is just a really solid option. And that's one thing that you have to think about whenever you're changing your main deck to deal with the matchup, is just because you want to make sure that you're not in the water if you go second against it, and then you just don't have any relevant outs, or maybe like a mediocre negate like Ash against Bird Up, right? So we want to make sure that we are prepared for those. The next thing is play against everyone, like everyone and everything. This is really important because you need to make sure that you were just ready to go. Like I was saying earlier about Earth Machines, you need to make sure that you were prepared for that matchup. Even if you don't know if you're really playing against it, it can happen. So you need to make sure that you know how to stop it. The other thing is looking for useful rulings. I will literally go on threads. I will ask other people that are judges. I will be going to different forums and asking, even like in the EU servers or my EU friends, I'll ask them like, hey, did any like crazy rulings come up for you? Shout out to Austin Smothers for this one though, because this is really important, and this is why I look for useful rulings, is because I was in the car on my way to Columbus. This was before COVID, and he leans over and he's like, hey, you know, there's a ruling that you may not know. And I was like, what is it? And it ends up being like one of my favorite rulings to date with Striker, and that's back in Eternal format. He goes, if they activate Crescendo when you use Ray Effect, the Ray doesn't get banished in the graveyard. And that actually won me a game because I used Ray Effect to bait the Crescendo. He flipped Crescendo. Ray was in my grave. I used Hornet Drone to summon Hayate. He like dealt with my Hayate, brought back a Ray, went Kagari, added back my Widow Anchor, stole his Dingirsu, and attacked for game. Like, it was super nice, and it's just something that you have to know. Like, if there's like really interesting rulings, you should really be trying to dig these up, because sometimes they really can help you. Or even if you know the ruling right and it works against your opponent's deck, like it's just something they're not able to do. They think they can. You can literally turn around and be like, no, I know this ruling, and you can call a judge over and you can win that call. That's something where I really find that useful before an event happens. The other thing is, do not submit your list until the day of or the day of pre-reg. This is something where I don't even care about pre-reg. Like, I will literally wait till the day of, because if you need to make any changes, once your deck list is in, you can't make any changes. So you want to make sure that you are absolutely ready to go. I've had this happen to many people around me. Thankfully, I've never had this happen to me where I've been like not prepared for the day of. But this is something where you want to make sure that you have your list on hand still, because if there is a change that you have to make, you need to make sure that you can do that. The other thing too is that it isn't really smart to make last minute changes before an event, because you regret it. You always do. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes. You always regret those last minute decisions. But this is still something that you want to make sure that you're on top of, and you're submitting your list as late as possible, so you make sure that you have enough time to really make sure that your list is what you want. The next thing, study up. Learn your matchups. You need to know where to hand trap people. You need to know how to side against them. You need to know what their interactions are, what their end boards are, what they're trying to accomplish. What are the big power cards that hurts your deck? If I'm playing Striker against Invoke Shaddoll Dogmatica, Shaddoll Fusion, Aerial, these are cards that absolutely are horrid against me. Like, if I see them resolved and they banish like Ray, Engage, and like an Anchor, for example, like, it's gonna be a really rough time for me, right? Because that's getting rid of my spell count, that's getting rid of my arrays. There's a lot of things that you really have to know. So before you go up against a matchup, you need to know how to beat it, because especially against a matchup like that, I might pass with just back row and not summon Shizuku, because I know that they're gonna Shaddoll Fusion me, or the chances they may Shaddoll Fusion me. So this is something where you can look up a lot of the deck lists that are really relevant, like top lists for that deck, so you know exactly what kind of decks they typically run, so you know what to be prepared for when you play against it. If you know that a certain deck is typically playing like Talents even, this is something something where if they like randomly blow up like your Shizuku and they're like, are you gonna use Ray Effect? That's something where you can read and be like, oh, they probably have talents, I'm not using Ray Effect. And that's something that you really have to be on top of as well. The next thing, take some time to review your replays. Play on DB, play as many games as you can. It's not like real testing, but it's still something that you can really try to learn your own interactions and typically try to learn what decks are trying to accomplish, no matter if you win or lose. And then you can go back in those replays and really try to figure out where you went wrong or what you could have done better, even if you won. Maybe there's a way that you could have closed out the game a lot sooner. You could have seen if it was a bit more risky or if it was something that you really wanted to do. But this is something where reviewing your replays is something that I do very frequently, and it's something that helps me out a ton because then I know like, oh wow, I could have done that there, and this would have been so much easier. It also gives you a nice way, if you turn your opponent's hand on and you can see what they have, as a good way to see if they're trying to bait you at all, learn about baiting situations, and then also learn how you could have played around it if they did have X cards. So you're like, all right, I did the right play here, but if they had Valor, was there another play that I could have done to win this game? Because if they did have Valor, I would have lost. But if I did it this way, I can actually still win. And next time, I should probably do it this way because I can play around Valor. That's something that you really have to know, because playing around hand traps can literally just blow your opponent out because they're like waiting to hit you on something and it just doesn't matter. And that's something that I really, really am thankful for too, that I like will literally sit there and do all day long, is just play around different hand traps and like learn my lines. The next thing though is leave it all out there on the table. You earned this event. You prepared for this event. You did everything in your power to make sure that you were ready for this event. Even if you go in there and you start off X2, play it out until you lose that other game, because at that point, then when you go X3, it doesn't really matter at that point because you'll be knocked out of the top cut or like going into the next day. But this is still something where if you are X2, just keep playing, keep doing it. If you're killing it, then keep killing it. This is something where you took all of the time and effort to prepare for this event. You need to just hop out there, do what you can. If it's your first event, then just play it all out. You know, just really enjoy yourself, enjoy the event, enjoy the side events if you get knocked out of the main event. There's a lot of them there, especially at a YCS, like Giant Card. There is a lot of like interesting ones too, like the speed duel events or what have you. So these are things where even if you don't do well at the event, feel free to go around, socialize, meet other Yu-Gi-Oh players, find people from other areas, get their contact info, play with them online. This is something that I do a lot, and I really like socializing because it's part of the game. Like, you're going in there and you're trying to enjoy yourself, have a good time. You want to do really well at the event and be competitive, but if you don't, there's always bright sides. Like, I traveled to Pittsburgh for Nationals, right? I met so many people over there, and that was a lot of fun. I even had one guy that I met, and we sat down and had a 2-hour-long Striker game. Like, it was fun. We just sat down for I saw he was playing Striker. I was like, do you want a mirror match? And he's like, sure. And so it was a really good time. So just use all this that you've done so far and just try to do the best that you possibly can, because it's a wonderful time once you're already there. You're hanging out, you have all your friends around you. There's nothing like it, honestly. That's why no one is a huge fan of playing online, and why we all really want IRL events back. For those of you who have never been to an IRL event, this is why. So again, if you're not already part of my community in Discord, you have that, in Twitch, on Twitter. On Twitter, I update everyone all the time, so feel free to go over there. My link in the description below, because I'm constantly just updating about things that I'm doing with the channel or different ideas that I have about different videos. The other thing too is that if you need a coaching session, a one-on-one, you can go to my Medify page down in the description below as well and go check that out. For a personalized lesson, you can go ahead and PM me on Discord. If there's something that you really want to learn that's not already offered, we can go ahead and work that out too. I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.